The sun had just begun its ascent, casting a warm golden hue over Maplewood Heights. As I stepped out onto my porch, the familiar scent of freshly turned soil mingled with the subtle fragrance of blooming lavender. My name is Alex Thompson, and for as long as I can remember, gardening wasn't just a hobby. It was my sanctuary. My home, a charming two-story bungalow with ivy climbing its brick facade, stood proudly at the end of Willow Lane. The meticulously maintained garden surrounding it was a testament to years of dedication and love. Rows of vibrant tulips, roses, and dahlias burst with color, their petals dancing gently in the morning breeze. A stone pathway meandered through the garden, leading to a quaint gazebo where I often spent quiet afternoons tending to my plants or simply enjoying the tranquility. Behind me, a well-organized shed housed my gardening tools, shovels, pruning shears, and an array of pots and fertilizers, all neatly arranged for easy access. Nearby, a vegetable patch thrived, boasting tomatoes, cucumbers, and bell peppers, nurtured with the same care as my ornamental flowers. This garden was more than just a collection of plants. It was a living extension of myself, a place where I could unwind and connect with nature amidst the hustle and bustle of suburban life. Maplewood Heights was a picturesque community, known for its pristine lawns and uniform houses, each mirroring the next in architectural style and landscaping. The neighborhood was tightly knit, governed by the Maplewood Heights Homeowners Association, HOA, an organization that prided itself on maintaining the aesthetic standards that made the area so desirable. While the HOA's regulations ensured uniformity and order, they often left little room for personal expression, especially when it came to gardening. This morning, as I trimmed the edges of my rose bushes, my neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, waved from her perfectly manicured lawn. "Good morning, Alex. Your roses are looking fantastic as always," she called out with a warm smile. "Thanks, Mrs. Jenkins. It's a beautiful day for gardening," I replied, returning her smile before turning my attention back to my plants. Despite the beauty of Maplewood Heights, I couldn't help but feel a growing tension between my passion for gardening and the HOA's strict guidelines. While I appreciated the orderly appearance of the neighborhood, I longed to experiment with new plant varieties and unconventional garden designs that often clashed with the HOA's vision of perfection. 5 years ago, Maplewood Heights expanded, incorporating several new homes into the original development. With the influx of new residents, the HOA became more stringent, implementing regulations that restricted not only the types of plants, but also the layout and maintenance of gardens. What was once a place where gardeners like me could thrive with a bit of creativity had slowly transformed into a community where conformity was the unspoken rule. As I watered my plants, I noticed a flyer pinned to the community bulletin board at the local park. It was a notice from the HOA, outlining new gardening restrictions that went into effect immediately. My heart sank as I read through the list of prohibited plants and mandatory garden designs. It was clear that the HOA had no intention of allowing any deviations from their prescribed standards. Later that evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, I sat on my porch, contemplating the flyer. Gardening had always been my escape, my way of expressing myself and bringing life to my surroundings. The thought of being restricted felt suffocating, like a garden choked by invasive weeds. I knew I couldn't let these new rules extinguish my passion. Determined to find a way to continue gardening without infringing on the HOA's regulations, I began researching alternatives. The idea of an indoor greenhouse took root in my mind. A space where I could cultivate my plants freely, away from the prying eyes of the HOA and the rigid standards they imposed. The following morning, with a newfound sense of purpose, I decided to attend the next HOA meeting to voice my concerns. As I prepared to leave, I glanced back at my garden, knowing that whatever happened next would shape the future of my beloved sanctuary. After a quick breakfast, I gathered my notes and the flyer that had ignited this conflict. Donning my favorite comfortable jeans and a plaid shirt, I took one last glance at my garden through the window, a silent promise to protect my sanctuary. The Maplewood Heights Community Center stood just a short walk from my home, its white facade welcoming yet unassuming. As I approached, I noticed a few familiar faces already gathered outside, clutching their own copies of the new regulations. The air buzzed with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. Inside, the community center was abuzz with residents taking their seats, the murmur of conversations filling the spacious room. The walls were adorned with framed photos of the neighborhood's lush landscapes and community events, a reminder of the shared pride in maintaining Maplewood Heights' aesthetic. I found an empty seat towards the middle of the room, positioning myself where I could clearly see the front podium. As I settled in, my mind raced through the points I wanted to address. I glanced around, noticing a few nods of encouragement from neighbors who seemed equally concerned about the new restrictions. Karen Brown, the HOA president, stood at the podium, exuding confidence and authority. Her sharp features and meticulously styled hair gave her an air of unapproachable professionalism. She began the meeting with a warm greeting, her voice steady and commanding. "Good morning, everyone," Karen announced. "Thank you for coming to today's meeting. As you know, our community has recently implemented new gardening regulations to ensure that Maplewood Heights remains a beautiful and cohesive neighborhood. These changes are effective immediately, and I'm here to answer any questions or concerns you might have." A few residents raised their hands, voicing support for the new rules. The room responded with murmurs of agreement, creating a wave of affirmation that made me feel slightly out of place for my impending challenge. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up, feeling the weight of many eyes on me. My heart pounded, but I steadied my voice. "Karen, thank you for organizing this meeting and for all the work the HOA does to maintain our community's standards. However, I have some concerns about the new gardening restrictions. While I understand the intention behind these rules, I feel they are overly restrictive and limit our ability to personalize our own spaces." Karen nodded politely, acknowledging my statement. "Alex, I appreciate your feedback. Could you elaborate on how you believe these restrictions are limiting your gardening practices?" I took a deep breath, drawing from my preparation. Gardening is not just a hobby for me. It's a form of self-expression and a way to connect with nature. The new restrictions prohibit certain plant varieties and dictate specific garden layouts, which stifles creativity and individuality. I believe there are ways to maintain our community's aesthetic without imposing such rigid controls. There was a brief pause as Karen considered my words. "I understand your passion for gardening, Alex. However, the regulations were developed after careful consideration of community feedback and expert advice. They are designed to ensure uniformity, which in turn helps preserve property values and the overall appeal of Maplewood Heights." I felt a surge of frustration but remained composed. I respect the HOA's goals, but I believe these regulations go beyond maintaining aesthetic appeal. They verge on controlling personal freedoms and can create unnecessary tension among residents. I'm not asking for complete freedom, but rather for a balance that allows for personal expression while still upholding our community's standards. Karen's expression remained neutral, though her eyes hinted at a mix of skepticism and curiosity. "Alex, your points are valid, and I appreciate your willingness to find a middle ground. Perhaps we can explore ways to incorporate more flexibility into the regulations without compromising our community's integrity. Do you have specific suggestions or examples that could help us achieve this balance?" Encouraged by her response, I outlined a few ideas I had researched, such as designated areas for more experimental gardening, a petition for plant variety approval processes, and community workshops on creative gardening within the guidelines. Karen listened attentively, taking notes and nodding thoughtfully. As I finished, a few other residents began to speak up, expressing similar concerns and supporting the need for more flexibility. The atmosphere shifted slightly, moving from initial support of the new regulations to a more balanced discussion about their implementation. Karen addressed the room, her tone more collaborative. "It's clear that there's a desire for both maintaining our community's standards and allowing for personal expression. Let's form a committee to review these regulations and explore ways to incorporate some of Alex's suggestions. Your input is invaluable in creating a harmonious living environment for all of us." Relief washed over me as I took my seat. The HOA's openness to discussion was a promising sign. As the meeting continued, more residents voiced their support for revising the regulations, and the sense of unity began to grow. After the meeting adjourned, Karen approached me with a warm smile. "Alex, thank you for your constructive feedback today. I look forward to working with you and the committee to find a solution that benefits everyone." I smiled back, feeling a renewed sense of hope. "Thank you, Karen. I'm eager to contribute and help find a balanced approach." As I left the community center, the morning sun now high in the sky, I felt a sense of accomplishment. The first step in challenging the HOA's restrictions had been taken, and with the support of my neighbors and the willingness of the HOA to listen, I was optimistic about finding a way to continue my gardening passion without conflict. The weeks following the HOA meeting passed by in a blur of anticipation and cautious optimism. As the newly formed committee began reviewing the proposed amendments to the gardening regulations, life in Maplewood Heights seemed to hold its breath. I threw myself into researching and compiling suggestions, eager to contribute meaningfully to the discussions. The community center meetings were productive, and I felt a sense of camaraderie with fellow residents who shared my desire for balance between personal expression and community standards. One crisp Saturday morning, as the first light of dawn filtered through the trees, I decided to take a leisurely stroll through my garden. The dew-kissed petals shimmered in the early sun, and the vibrant colors of my tulips and dahlias seemed to dance with renewed vitality. Gardening had always been my refuge, a place where I could lose myself in the rhythm of nature. Today, however, a lingering unease tugged at the edges of my contentment. As I approached the vegetable patch, I noticed a black van parked at the far end of my property. My heart skipped a beat as two uniformed individuals emerged, their presence immediately signaling an impending confrontation. One was a stern-faced man with a clipboard clutched in his hand, while the other was a woman with sharp eyes that seemed to pierce through the morning mist. "Mr. Thompson?" the man in uniform called out, his voice devoid of warmth. "Yes, that's me," I replied cautiously, setting down my watering can. "How can I help you today?" The woman stepped forward, holding up a copy of the new HOA regulations. "We've been notified of potential violations on your property. Specifically, the types of plants you're cultivating do not comply with the new guidelines." I glanced down at the flyer she held, the same one that had set this entire ordeal in motion. "I believe I'm in compliance with the general guidelines. My plants are well maintained and do not pose any issues to the community's aesthetics." The man flipped through his clipboard, his expression unreadable. "Our records indicate that certain species in your garden are on the prohibited list. We're here to assess the situation and determine the necessary actions to bring your garden into compliance." A surge of frustration welled up inside me. I've been nothing but cooperative since the regulations were announced. If there are specific issues, I'm more than willing to address them. But this feels like an unnecessary intrusion. The woman's eyes softened slightly, though her tone remained firm. Mr. Thompson, we understand your passion for gardening, but the HOA has a responsibility to enforce these standards uniformly. We can't make exceptions without clear justification." Before I could respond, the man stepped closer, pointing to a particularly vibrant cluster of exotic orchids thriving near the gazebo. "These orchids are not on the approved list. They require specific maintenance that, according to our guidelines, hasn't been documented in your recent garden inspections." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. The orchids were one of my pride and joy, symbols of my dedication and creativity. I've maintained all my plants diligently. If there are concerns about documentation, I can provide records from the past few months. The woman nodded thoughtfully. "That would be helpful. In the meantime, we need to ensure that any non-compliant plants are either brought into line with the regulations or removed. We'll need to schedule a follow-up visit after reviewing your records." As the inspectors prepared to leave, the man offered a curt nod. "We appreciate your cooperation, Mr. Thompson. We'll be in touch once we've reviewed your documentation." Once the van was out of sight, I sank onto the stone pathway, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. The very thing I cherished most, my garden, was now the source of contention and potential penalties. I felt a mixture of anger and helplessness, questioning the fairness of the HOA's rigid enforcement. Determined not to let the HOA's strictures crush my passion, I returned to my home, my mind racing with thoughts of resistance and innovation. As I sat at my kitchen table, flipping through gardening manuals and online forums, an idea began to take shape. If the HOA could control the appearance of my outdoor space, perhaps I could reclaim my freedom indoors. The concept of an indoor greenhouse sparked in my mind, an oasis where I could cultivate my plants without the constraints of community regulations. The thought was both exhilarating and daunting. Building an indoor greenhouse would require time, resources, and technical knowledge, but the prospect of preserving my gardening sanctuary was worth the effort. I began outlining a plan, sketching designs that blended seamlessly with my living space while providing the ideal environment for my beloved plants. The idea of an indoor haven where creativity could flourish without external interference ignited a renewed sense of purpose within me. This was more than just a solution to a problem. It was an opportunity to innovate and adapt in the face of adversity. As the day turned to evening, I felt a sense of clarity settle over me. The HOA's ban had inadvertently opened the door to a new chapter in my gardening journey, one that would challenge me to think outside the box and find ways to continue nurturing my passion despite the obstacles. With determination fueling my every move, I was ready to embark on the next phase of this unexpected adventure. The confrontation with the HOA inspectors lingered in my mind long after they had left my garden. The sight of my beloved orchids under scrutiny had ignited a spark of determination within me. I couldn't let the HOA's rigid regulations extinguish my passion for gardening. If they wanted to control my outdoor space, I would find a way to continue nurturing my plants on my own terms. The next morning, I woke up early, the first rays of sunlight filtering through my bedroom curtains. With a renewed sense of purpose, I decided to visit the local library, Maplewood Heights Library, to dive into research on indoor gardening solutions. The library, a modern building with large glass windows and shelves that seemed to stretch endlessly, was my sanctuary for knowledge. As I pushed open the heavy wooden doors, the familiar scent of aged paper and polished wood greeted me. I grabbed a copy of The Complete Indoor Gardener from the shelf and settled into a quiet corner with a stack of books and my laptop. Hours passed as I immersed myself in articles about hydroponics, vertical gardening, and the latest advancements in indoor greenhouse technology. During one of my research sessions, I stumbled upon an online forum dedicated to indoor gardening enthusiasts. The community was vibrant, filled with individuals sharing their projects, offering advice, and celebrating their successes. I decided to create an account and introduce myself. Hi everyone, I'm Alex from Maplewood Heights. Recently, I've been facing some restrictions with my outdoor garden due to HOA regulations. I'm looking to build an indoor greenhouse and would love any tips or resources you could share. Within minutes, responses began to flood in. Green Thumb Guru, a seasoned indoor gardener with years of experience, replied first. Welcome, Alex. Building an indoor greenhouse is a fantastic idea. Start by determining the space you have available and the types of plants you want to grow. I'd recommend checking out hydroponic systems. They're efficient and can be tailored to various spaces. Another user, Plant Mama 23, chimed in, I've been using LED grow lights for my indoor setup. They mimic natural sunlight and are adjustable based on the needs of different plants. Also, consider investing in a good ventilation system to keep the air fresh and prevent mold. The encouragement from the community was invigorating. It wasn't just about finding solutions. It was about connecting with like-minded individuals who understood my passion and the challenges I faced. Back at home, I set up a makeshift workstation in my home office, a room I had always reserved for personal projects and quiet contemplation. The walls were adorned with botanical prints and shelves filled with gardening books and tools. Spreading out my notes and the advice from the online community, I began sketching the initial plans for my indoor greenhouse. I envisioned a sleek, modular system that could fit seamlessly into my living space. The design included vertical shelving for herbs and small plants, larger compartments for vegetables, and dedicated areas for flowering plants like my cherished orchids. I incorporated adjustable LED grow lights and a compact hydroponic system to ensure optimal growth conditions. As I worked, my phone buzzed with a notification from Green Thumb Guru. Hey Alex, check out this tutorial on building a vertical hydroponic system. It might fit well with your design. Let me know if you need any help. Grateful for the support, I replied, "Thanks so much. I'll definitely take a look. Appreciate the help." By late afternoon, the sketchbook was filled with detailed diagrams and notes. I had outlined the materials needed, the layout of the space, and the specific requirements for each plant section. The project was taking shape, and the excitement of bringing it to life overshadowed the frustration from earlier. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow through my office window, I leaned back in my chair, surveying my work. The indoor greenhouse wasn't just a practical solution. It was a symbol of resilience and creativity. It represented my refusal to be confined by restrictive regulations and my commitment to preserving what I loved most. Determined to move forward, I made a list of tasks for the coming weeks, sourcing materials, consulting with online experts, and perhaps even inviting a few supportive neighbors to join me in this endeavor. The idea had blossomed from a simple reaction to adversity into a full-fledged project that could transform not only my gardening experience, but also potentially inspire others in the community. Just as I was about to close my laptop, there was a knock at the door. Surprised, I made my way to the entrance and opened it to find Linda Martinez, a neighbor I had occasionally chatted with during gardening talks. "Hi, Alex," Linda greeted with a warm smile. "I heard about the issues you've been having with the HOA. I wanted to see if there's anything I can do to help." Her genuine concern was a welcome relief. "Thanks, Linda. I'm actually working on a solution by setting up an indoor greenhouse. It's a bit of a project, but I'm hopeful it can help me continue gardening without running into the HOA's restrictions." Linda stepped inside, her eyes lighting up with interest. "That sounds amazing. I've always wanted to try indoor gardening myself, but didn't know where to start. Maybe I could join you. We could share resources and ideas." I smiled, feeling a sense of camaraderie. "I'd love that. The more support, the better." Together, we pored over my sketches, brainstorming ways to optimize the space and ensure the indoor greenhouse would be both functional and aesthetically pleasing. Linda's enthusiasm and fresh perspective added new dimensions to the project, reinforcing my belief that this was more than just a personal endeavor. It was a community-driven initiative. The excitement from my conversation with Linda lingered in my mind as I entered the garage that afternoon. The space, once cluttered with old tools and forgotten boxes, was about to undergo a significant transformation. Determined to turn my vision into reality, I began unpacking the materials we had purchased the previous day. Linda was already in the garage, laying out the modular shelving units and organizing the LED grow lights. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and her organized approach helped ease some of my lingering anxiety. "All right, Alex," she said, handing me a set of screws and a screwdriver. "Let's start by assembling the shelving units. We need a sturdy foundation to support all your plants." I nodded, feeling a surge of determination. "Absolutely. Once we have the shelves up, we can position the grow lights and set up the hydroponic system." We worked side by side, the garage filling with the sound of tools clicking and the occasional clink of metal parts coming together. Linda's experience was invaluable. She quickly assembled the shelves while I focused on securing them to the walls. "Now, do you think vertical gardening will work well with your plant varieties?" Linda asked, adjusting a shelf to ensure it was level. "I believe so," I replied, tightening a screw. "I want to maximize space, especially for my herbs and small vegetables. The orchids will have their dedicated section with specialized lighting." As the shelving units took shape, the garage began to resemble a miniature greenhouse. The vertical arrangements promised to create a lush, organized display of greenery that mirrored the vibrancy of my outdoor garden. Next, we moved on to the LED grow lights. Linda meticulously positioned each light to ensure even coverage across all shelves. "These lights are adjustable, so we can tweak the intensity based on each plant's needs," she explained. I watched as she connected the lights to the power source, the room gradually brightening with each installation. The controlled illumination promised to create the perfect environment for my plants to thrive, regardless of the outside restrictions imposed by the HOA. With the shelves and lights in place, it was time to tackle the hydroponic system. We unpacked the components, water pumps, nutrient reservoirs, and tubing, and began assembling the intricate setup. "This part can be tricky," Linda cautioned, her hands deftly connecting the tubing. We need to ensure there are no leaks and that the nutrient solution circulates properly. I followed her instructions closely, double-checking each connection. After several adjustments and a few tense moments, the system was operational. The water began to flow smoothly, carrying essential nutrients to the plants, a vital component of our indoor greenhouse. Just as we were making good progress, a sudden issue arose. One of the pumps started making an unusual grinding noise, and the flow of the nutrient solution became erratic. I rushed to inspect the problem, frustration mounting. "Looks like pump 2 is malfunctioning," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the setback. "Any ideas on how to fix this?" Linda approached, her expression calm but focused. "Let's disconnect it and see if we can clean the filter. Sometimes debris can cause these issues." We carefully dismantled the problematic pump, revealing a clogged filter beneath. After cleaning out the debris, we reassembled the pump and tested the system again. Relief washed over me as the flow returned to normal. "Thanks, Linda. I don't know what I'd do without your help," I admitted, feeling a mix of gratitude and exhaustion. "No problem, Alex. We're almost there," she replied with a reassuring smile. With the technical aspects sorted, we turned our attention to personalizing the greenhouse. I selected a variety of plants, carefully choosing each one based on its light and humidity requirements. The orchids, my pride and joy, were placed in a dedicated section with specialized care to ensure their continued flourishing. Linda offered invaluable input on plant placement and aesthetic arrangement, her suggestions enhancing both the functionality and beauty of the greenhouse. Together, we arranged the plants in a harmonious layout, the vibrant colors and lush greenery transforming the garage into a miniature Eden. As we were putting the finishing touches on the greenhouse, another challenge emerged. The temperature in one section began to rise unexpectedly, causing a few of my herbs to wilt slightly. Panic set in as I realized the delicate balance we needed to maintain. "Something's not right with the ventilation," I muttered, inspecting the setup. "The temperature here is too high for these plants." Linda examined the ventilation fans we had installed. "Let's check the airflow here. Maybe we need to adjust the fan speed or reposition some vents." We spent the next hour tweaking the ventilation system, ensuring that each area of the greenhouse maintained an optimal environment for its respective plants. Finally, after several adjustments, the temperature stabilized, and the affected herbs began to recover. As the day turned to evening, the indoor greenhouse stood completed, a testament to resilience and collaboration. The plants thrived under the carefully controlled environment, their vibrant colors and healthy growth reaffirming the success of our efforts. Sitting back and admiring the finished project, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The indoor greenhouse was more than just a solution to the HOA's restrictions. It was a symbol of my unwavering dedication and the power of community support. Despite the challenges and setbacks, we had created something beautiful and functional, a sanctuary where my passion for gardening could flourish without constraint. Linda smiled, her presence a reminder of the importance of having allies in the face of adversity. "Looks like we did it, Alex. Your indoor greenhouse is ready to nurture your plants and keep your gardening spirit alive." I nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude. "Thank you, Linda. I couldn't have done this without you." As I watched the soft glow of the LED lights illuminate the greenhouse, I knew that this was just the beginning. The indoor greenhouse was a new chapter in my gardening journey, one that promised creativity, growth, and the unwavering pursuit of my passion, despite the obstacles imposed by the HOA. The hum of the LED grow lights filled the newly transformed garage, casting a vibrant glow over the lush greenery that now thrived within. I stepped back to admire the indoor greenhouse, a sanctuary of my own making where creativity and passion could flourish unrestricted by the HOA's stringent guidelines. Linda stood beside me, her hands still slightly smudged with soil from our earlier efforts. "We did it," she said, a triumphant smile lighting up her face. "Your plants look incredible." I nodded, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment. "Thanks to you, Linda. I couldn't have pulled this off without your help." As we basked in the success of our project, the tranquility was abruptly shattered by a loud knock at the garage door. My heart skipped a beat. The last thing I wanted was another confrontation with the HOA, especially after the hurdles we had just overcome. I exchanged a concerned glance with Linda before approaching the door cautiously. Peering through the peephole, I saw two familiar faces: Officer Mike Daniels, our friendly neighborhood police officer, and Karen Brown, the ever-determined HOA president. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. "Karen, Officer Daniels, what can I do for you?" Karen stepped forward, her expression stern. "Good evening, Alex. I'm here with Officer Daniels to discuss your indoor greenhouse." My stomach churned. "I'm not sure what the issue is, Karen. We've been following all the guidelines discussed in the committee meeting." Officer Daniels nodded, his demeanor calm but authoritative. "Karen has some concerns about the modifications you've made. According to the new regulations, any significant alterations to the property structure require prior approval from the HOA board." I felt a surge of frustration. "But these modifications are entirely within my garage. It's an indoor space, separate from the exterior landscaping that's regulated." Karen stepped closer, her eyes narrowing slightly. "The regulations aren't just about the exterior. They cover any modifications that could potentially impact the overall aesthetics and property values of Maplewood Heights. An indoor greenhouse, especially one as elaborate as yours, sets a precedent that could lead to further deviations from our standards." I clenched my fists, trying to maintain my composure. "I've been nothing but cooperative, Karen. This greenhouse allows me to continue my gardening without infringing on the community's appearance. It's a solution that benefits both of us." Linda placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Karen, Alex has been a model resident. This indoor greenhouse is a testament to his dedication and creativity. It doesn't detract from the neighborhood's aesthetic. In fact, it adds a unique touch." Karen sighed, clearly torn. "I understand your intentions, Alex, but the HOA must enforce the rules uniformly. If we make exceptions, it undermines the entire regulatory framework we've established." Officer Daniels interjected softly. "Karen, maybe we can find a middle ground. Alex's greenhouse is impressive, and it might be worth discussing how such modifications can be accommodated without setting a problematic precedent." Karen glanced between me and Officer Daniels, her stance softening slightly. "Perhaps there's room for negotiation. I'd like to review the details of your setup and see if it can be integrated within our guidelines." I felt a flicker of hope. "I'm more than willing to provide any information you need and make adjustments if necessary. My goal has always been to contribute positively to our community." Karen nodded thoughtfully. "Very well. Let's schedule a follow-up meeting where you can present the specifics of your indoor greenhouse. We can discuss how it aligns with our standards and explore potential accommodations." Relief washed over me as she extended her hand. "Thank you for understanding, Alex. I appreciate your willingness to work with us." I shook her hand firmly. "Of course, Karen. I'm committed to finding a solution that works for everyone." As Karen and Officer Daniels left, Linda turned to me with a supportive smile. "That went better than I expected." I exhaled slowly, feeling the tension ease. "I hope so. We still have to present our plans and demonstrate that this greenhouse won't disrupt the community's harmony." Linda nodded. "We will. Let's make sure everything is in order for the next meeting. The more prepared we are, the better our chances of getting this approved." Later that evening, as I sat in my indoor greenhouse surrounded by thriving plants, I reflected on the encounter. While the HOA's initial reaction had been discouraging, Karen's willingness to reconsider gave me hope. This wasn't just about my garden anymore. It was about setting a precedent for innovation and personal expression within the community's framework. Determined to turn this challenge into an opportunity, I began compiling a comprehensive presentation for the upcoming meeting. I included detailed plans, maintenance schedules, and evidence of how the indoor greenhouse could enhance rather than detract from Maplewood Heights' aesthetic appeal. With Linda's help, I sought testimonials from online communities and other gardening enthusiasts who had successfully integrated indoor greenhouses into their homes. The days that followed were a whirlwind of preparation. Linda and I spent countless hours refining our proposal, ensuring that every aspect was meticulously documented and presented. We even conducted mock presentations to anticipate potential questions and objections from the HOA board. As the next HOA meeting approached, the sense of anticipation was palpable. This time, however, I felt more confident. With a well-prepared presentation and the backing of supportive neighbors like Linda, I was ready to advocate for my indoor greenhouse and, by extension, for the freedom to express individuality within our community. The garage, now a vibrant indoor oasis, stood as a symbol of what could be achieved through perseverance, collaboration, and a willingness to adapt. Whatever the outcome of the upcoming meeting, I knew that this journey had already transformed my relationship with gardening and my community in ways I hadn't anticipated. The satisfaction of seeing my indoor greenhouse thrive was quickly overshadowed by a lingering sense of unease. Just a few days after its completion, I noticed Karen Brown observing my home more intently than usual. Her scrutinizing gaze seemed to pierce through the windows, lingering on the subtle glow emanating from the garage. One afternoon, as I tended to my orchids under the gentle hum of the LED lights, there was a firm knock at my front door. My heart raced as I approached, wondering if it was another inspection or perhaps a friendly neighbor checking in. When I opened the door, I found Karen standing there, flanked by Officer Daniels. "Good afternoon, Alex," Karen began, her tone unusually stern. "May we come in?" I nodded, stepping aside to allow them entry. Inside, the indoor greenhouse was a beacon of lush greenery, a stark contrast to the rigid exterior that the HOA prized. Karen's eyes didn't miss a single detail as she surveyed the space, her expression unreadable. "Alex, we need to discuss your indoor greenhouse," Karen stated, her voice devoid of the earlier cordiality. "While I appreciate your dedication to gardening, this setup poses several concerns regarding our community regulations." I took a deep breath, maintaining my composure. "I've ensured that everything complies with the guidelines discussed in the committee meeting. The greenhouse is entirely contained within my garage and doesn't affect the exterior aesthetics," Officer Daniels interjected smoothly. "Karen, according to the new regulations, any significant modifications to the property structure require prior approval from the HOA board. The indoor greenhouse, as impressive as it is, falls under this category." Karen stepped closer, her eyes narrowing slightly. "The regulations aren't just about the exterior. They cover any modifications that could potentially impact the overall aesthetics and property values of Maplewood Heights. An indoor greenhouse, especially one as elaborate as yours, sets a precedent that could lead to further deviations from our standards." I clenched my fists, trying to maintain my composure. "I've been nothing but cooperative, Karen. This greenhouse allows me to continue my gardening without infringing on the community's appearance. It's a solution that benefits both of us." Linda placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Karen, Alex has been a model resident. This indoor greenhouse is a testament to his dedication and creativity. It doesn't detract from the neighborhood's aesthetic. In fact, it adds a unique touch." Karen sighed, clearly torn. "I understand your intentions, Alex, but the HOA must enforce the rules uniformly. If we make exceptions, it undermines the entire regulatory framework we've established." Officer Daniels interjected softly. "Karen, maybe we can find a middle ground. Alex's greenhouse is impressive, and it might be worth discussing how such modifications can be accommodated without setting a problematic precedent." Karen glanced between me and Officer Daniels, her stance softening slightly. "Perhaps there's room for negotiation. I'd like to review the details of your setup and see if it can be integrated within our guidelines." I felt a flicker of hope. "I'm more than willing to provide any information you need and make adjustments if necessary. My goal has always been to contribute positively to our community." Karen nodded thoughtfully. "Very well. Let's schedule a follow-up meeting where you can present the specifics of your indoor greenhouse. We can discuss how it aligns with our standards and explore potential accommodations." Relief washed over me as she extended her hand. "Thank you for understanding, Alex. I appreciate your willingness to work with us." I shook her hand firmly. "Of course, Karen. I'm committed to finding a solution that works for everyone." As Karen and Officer Daniels prepared to leave, she turned back to me. "I hope we can find a resolution that respects both your passion and our community's guidelines. We value residents like you who contribute positively, and I'm sure we can work something out. I nodded, feeling a flicker of hope. I'm more than willing to provide any information you need and make adjustments if necessary. My goal has always been to contribute positively to our community. Linda approached me, her expression a blend of concern and determination. Don't let this discourage you, Alex. We'll get through this together. Let's prepare for the board meeting and make sure your greenhouse is fully compliant. I smiled, grateful for her unwavering support. Thanks, Linda. Your help means a lot. As the evening settled, I reflected on the day's events. The HOA's initial willingness to discuss and the subsequent pushback underscored the challenges ahead. However, with the support of allies like Linda and a well-prepared case, I felt more confident in navigating the upcoming board meeting. The indoor greenhouse wasn't just a personal project anymore. It had become a symbol of resilience and the ongoing struggle between individual passion and communal regulations. Determined to uphold my right to garden freely, I began organizing my presentation, ensuring every detail was accounted for. The path forward was fraught with challenges, but the success of the greenhouse and the support from my community fueled my resolve. This battle with the HOA was far from over, but I was ready to fight for the green sanctuary that had become an integral part of my life. The tension in the air was palpable as the weeks following Karen's visit unfolded. The HOA's scrutiny of my indoor greenhouse intensified, with residents whispering about the precedent it might set. Despite Linda's unwavering support and the initial success of our project, the HOA's rigid stance made it clear that negotiations alone wouldn't suffice. It was time to escalate the matter. One chilly Thursday afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table, poring over legal documents and researching property rights. The frustration of dealing with the HOA's overreach weighed heavily on me, but amidst the frustration, a spark of determination ignited. I couldn't let the HOA stifle my passion for gardening or set a restrictive precedent for the entire community. If the HOA wanted to enforce these rules, I would challenge them legally. After hours of research, I decided to reach out to Sandra Martinez, a renowned property rights attorney known for her success in cases against powerful homeowner associations. I found her contact information on a local legal directory and dialed her number, my heart pounding with a mix of hope and anxiety. "Hello, Sandra Martinez speaking," a professional voice answered. "Hi, Sandra. My name is Alex Thompson. I'm a resident of Maplewood Heights, and I need legal assistance regarding some issues I'm having with our HOA," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a brief pause before she responded. "Alex, I've heard about the tensions in Maplewood Heights. I'd be happy to discuss your situation in more detail. Can we schedule a meeting for tomorrow morning?" "Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sandra. I really appreciate your help," I replied, relief washing over me. The next morning, I arrived at Sandra's office, a modern space with large windows and an air of professionalism. She greeted me warmly, inviting me to sit across from her desk. "Thank you for meeting with me, Sandra," I began. "The HOA has been enforcing new gardening restrictions that are overly restrictive and infringe on my personal freedoms. They've even confronted me about my indoor greenhouse, claiming it violates their rules." Sandra listened intently, her expression thoughtful. "I understand your frustration, Alex. From what you've described, it sounds like the HOA is overstepping its boundaries. Let's go over the details and see how we can build a strong case against them." Over the next hour, Sandra meticulously reviewed the HOA's regulations, my correspondence with Karen, and the documentation I had compiled about my indoor greenhouse. She pointed out several clauses that were either vague or outright oppressive, indicating potential areas of legal contention. "We have a solid foundation here," Sandra concluded, her confidence reassuring. "The HOA is acting beyond its authority by enforcing these regulations so strictly, especially when they weren't clearly communicated or justified. We can file a formal complaint for overreach and seek an injunction to prevent further harassment." I felt a surge of hope. "That sounds promising. What are the next steps?" "First, we need to file a formal complaint with the local housing authority and prepare for a potential court case. I'll also gather testimonies from other residents who might be experiencing similar issues. The more evidence we have, the stronger our case will be." As I left Sandra's office, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. With Sandra's expertise on my side, I was ready to take on the HOA and defend my right to garden freely. The legal battle ahead was daunting, but I knew it was necessary to protect not only my passion, but also the rights of other residents who might be silently suffering under the HOA's oppressive regulations. That evening, I met with Linda and a few other supportive neighbors at my indoor greenhouse. We discussed our plans, shared stories of HOA overreach, and strategized on how to present our collective grievances. The solidarity among us was empowering, turning what began as my personal struggle into a communal fight for justice. Sandra's involvement brought a sense of legitimacy to our cause. She arranged meetings with other affected residents, compiling a comprehensive dossier of complaints and evidence against the HOA. Together, we began drafting a formal complaint, meticulously detailing the HOA's oversteps and the impact they had on our lives. As the days turned into weeks, the preparation intensified. Sandra coordinated with local legal experts and property rights advocates, building a coalition of support that extended beyond Maplewood Heights. The media caught wind of our fight, portraying it as a David versus Goliath battle between individual rights and bureaucratic overreach. Coverage in local newspapers and online platforms brought additional support, with more residents coming forward to share their experiences. The night before filing the complaint, I stood in my indoor greenhouse surrounded by thriving plants that symbolized resilience and growth. Linda joined me, her presence a comforting reminder of the community backing our cause. "Tomorrow's a big day," she said softly. "Are you ready?" I nodded, taking a deep breath. More than ever, this is for all of us who believe in the right to express ourselves and live freely without unnecessary restrictions. The following morning, Sandra and I arrived at the courthouse, the weight of our mission evident in our determined expressions. We filed the formal complaint, presenting our case against the HOA with clarity and conviction. The process was arduous, filled with paperwork and procedural hurdles, but Sandra's expertise guided us through each step. As we awaited the initial hearings, the community rallied around us. Supporters organized peaceful protests, penned letters to local officials, and continued to share their stories, creating a united front against the HOA's tyranny. The legal battle had officially begun, and while the road ahead was uncertain, the collective strength of our community fueled my determination to see it through. In the courtroom, Sandra presented our case with precision, highlighting the HOA's overreach and the detrimental impact of their restrictive regulations. The opposition, led by Karen and a team of well-resourced lawyers, attempted to undermine our claims, arguing that the HOA was simply enforcing agreed-upon standards. However, Sandra's arguments were compelling, supported by evidence and testimonies from multiple residents who had been similarly oppressed. The hearings were tense, each session drawing more attention and support from the community. As the legal battle progressed, I found myself not just fighting for my garden, but for the fundamental right to personal expression and autonomy within our community. The case became a symbol of resistance against unjust authority, inspiring others to stand up for their rights. Weeks turned into months as the legal proceedings unfolded, each day bringing us closer to a resolution. The support from Sandra, Linda, and the growing coalition of residents fortified my resolve. This fight was more than just about gardening. It was about preserving the spirit of individuality and fostering a community where everyone could thrive without fear of undue control. Through it all, my indoor greenhouse remained a beacon of hope and resilience, a testament to what can be achieved when passion meets determination. As I continued to nurture my plants, I knew that regardless of the outcome, this journey had already transformed not only my life, but also the fabric of our community. The courtroom was a solemn place, its high ceilings and wooden paneling lending an air of gravity to the proceedings. I sat beside Sandra Martinez, my attorney, feeling a mix of nervous anticipation and steadfast determination. The legal battle against the Maplewood Heights Homeowners Association, HOA, had reached its pivotal moment, and the outcome would not only determine the fate of my indoor greenhouse, but also set a precedent for personal freedoms within our community. As the morning sun streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors, the judge entered the room, signaling the start of the hearing. Karen Brown, the HOA president, stood at the opposite bench, flanked by her team of seasoned lawyers. Her expression was stern, masking any hint of the uncertainty that lay beneath her composed exterior. Sandra gave me a reassuring nod before rising to address the court. Your Honor, we are here today to address the overreach of the Maplewood Heights HOA in imposing restrictive gardening regulations that infringe upon the personal freedoms of its residents. My client, Mr. Alex Thompson, has been unjustly targeted for maintaining an indoor greenhouse that does not pose any threat to the community's aesthetics or property values. Karen stood as well, her voice steady but unyielding. Your Honor, the HOA has a responsibility to maintain the uniform standards that make Maplewood Heights a desirable place to live. Mr. Thompson's indoor greenhouse, while impressive, sets a dangerous precedent that could lead to further deviations from our established guidelines. We seek enforcement of the regulations to preserve the integrity of our community, Sandra countered, presenting a series of documents and testimonies from other residents who had experienced similar overreach by the HOA. Your Honor, the regulations in question are overly broad and lack clear definitions, allowing for arbitrary enforcement. Furthermore, Mr. Thompson has demonstrated a willingness to cooperate and comply with reasonable modifications. The HOA's actions are not only punitive, but also discriminatory, targeting individuals who express their creativity within their private spaces. The judge listened attentively, nodding occasionally as the arguments unfolded. Witnesses were called to testify, including fellow residents who supported Alex's right to personal expression and those who had felt stifled by the HOA's stringent rules. The evidence presented painted a picture of an HOA that prioritized control over community well-being, stifling individuality under the guise of maintaining property values. After hours of deliberation, the judge took a brief recess before delivering the verdict. The courtroom fell silent as she returned, her presence commanding attention. After careful consideration of the evidence and testimonies presented, it is clear that the Maplewood Heights HOA has exceeded its authority in enforcing gardening regulations that infringe upon the personal freedoms of its residents. The regulations in question are deemed overly restrictive and lack the necessary clarity for fair enforcement. A collective sigh of relief echoed through the room as the judge continued. Therefore, Mr. Alex Thompson is granted the right to maintain his indoor greenhouse without further interference from the HOA. Additionally, the HOA is ordered to revise its regulations to ensure they are clear, reasonable, and subject to fair enforcement without discrimination. Karen's face flushed with a mix of frustration and disbelief, while Sandra extended her hand to me with a victorious smile. "Thank you, Your Honor," she said respectfully. As the courtroom began to empty, several residents approached me, offering congratulations and expressions of gratitude. Linda Martinez stood beside me, her eyes shining with pride. "You did it, Alex. This is a huge win for all of us." I nodded, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment. "Thank you, everyone. This isn't just about my garden. It's about our right to express ourselves and live freely within our community." The verdict reverberated through Maplewood Heights, sparking a wave of change and reflection within the community. News of the court's decision spread quickly, garnering support from residents who had long felt oppressed by the HOA's rigid regulations. The ruling not only upheld my right to maintain an indoor greenhouse, but also set a powerful precedent for personal freedoms and community governance. In the weeks that followed, the HOA was mandated to restructure its regulations, ensuring they were clear, fair, and conducive to both community standards and individual expression. Karen Brown, once the staunch enforcer of these rules, found herself reevaluating her approach. Under the court's directive, an independent auditor was appointed to oversee the revision of the HOA's bylaws, ensuring transparency and accountability in future governance. The transformation in Maplewood Heights was palpable. The community meetings, once dominated by strict rule enforcement, became forums for open dialogue and collaborative decision-making. Residents felt empowered to voice their opinions and contribute to shaping the neighborhood's future, fostering a sense of unity and mutual respect that had been missing for years. My indoor greenhouse became a symbol of resilience and innovation within the community. It stood as a testament to what could be achieved when individuals stood up for their rights and worked together to create positive change. Inspired by my journey, other residents began exploring creative solutions to express their individuality within the community's framework, leading to a vibrant and diverse neighborhood that balanced personal freedoms with collective harmony. Reconciliation followed, as Karen Brown acknowledged the need for a more balanced and inclusive approach to community governance. She reached out to me, extending an olive branch and expressing a willingness to collaborate on fostering a more supportive and flexible HOA. Together, we worked to implement new policies that encouraged creativity while maintaining the community's aesthetic standards, ensuring that Maplewood Heights could thrive as a place where everyone felt valued and free to express themselves. As I hosted the first community garden party in my indoor greenhouse, surrounded by neighbors who had once been adversaries, I reflected on the journey we had undertaken. What began as a struggle against restrictive regulations had evolved into a movement for positive change, transforming not only my own life, but also the fabric of our community. The garden party was a celebration of our collective resilience and the newfound unity within Maplewood Heights. Families spread picnic blankets on my expansive lawn, children played games in the meadow, and the indoor greenhouse buzzed with conversations about gardening tips and future community projects. The vibrant colors and lush greenery of the greenhouse mirrored the renewed spirit of the neighborhood, a place where individuality and community harmony coexisted beautifully. Later that evening, as the sun set over the rolling hills of my land, casting a golden glow on the neighboring houses of Maplewood Heights, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The journey had been arduous, filled with challenges and setbacks, but the outcome was a thriving, united community that embraced both personal expression and collective well-being. Reaching my car after the party, I glanced back at my home and the flourishing indoor greenhouse, now seamlessly integrated into the living space. It was more than just a solution to a problem. It was a symbol of what could be achieved through perseverance, collaboration, and the unwavering pursuit of one's passion. As I drove home, I knew that Maplewood Heights had been forever changed, blossoming into a community that celebrated diversity, fostered innovation, and stood as a beacon of resilience and unity.